My name is Elena Carter, and if you had asked me a year ago what family meant, I would have said loyalty. I would have said safety. I would have said unshakable love. But on my wedding day, standing in my own living room in Charleston, South Carolina, I learned how fragile those ideas were. The house around me was quiet that morning. It was the house I had worked so hard to buy, a two-story white home with blue shutters and a porch swing that rocked gently when the wind rolled in from the coast. I had bought it myself, not a penny of it gifted by my parents. I still remember the feeling when I signed the deed: triumph, pride, and relief. This was my space, my foundation, the proof that my long nights and endless hours of work meant something. Inside, the scent of peonies filled the air. They sat in glass jars on the mantel, their pale pink petals opening like secrets. I wore a simple silk dress, not flashy, but one that felt like me, graceful and steady. Maya, my best friend since college, stood near the window, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulder as she checked her watch for the fifth time. "They should have been here by now," she murmured, almost to herself. I gave her a small nod, my lips pulling into something that might have been a smile if it didn't feel so hollow. I wanted to believe my parents would appear at any moment, walking through the door with proud faces, telling me that the years of sacrifice had mattered, that they wanted to see their daughter take her vows. But then my phone buzzed. The sound sliced through the quiet room. I picked it up, expecting to see a message that said, "We're on our way." Instead, my eyes froze on the words glowing across the screen. It was from my mother, Margaret. "We are in New York at Ava's dinner party. You should stay alone on your marriage day so you can learn a lesson." I stared at it, the letters twisting like knives. My hands trembled as I scrolled down and saw another notification. My father, Thomas, had added nothing more than a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. That was what I meant to them. I looked across the room at Daniel Hayes, the man I was about to marry. He had arrived earlier, his navy suit jacket slung casually over his arm, his brown hair slightly mussed from the wind outside. His eyes, though, were steady and kind, and they caught mine now with concern. "What happened?" he asked. "They left," I whispered. "They went to Ava's." His brows furrowed. "On your wedding day?" "Yes," I said, forcing a bitter laugh. "My parents chose a dinner party in New York over my marriage." Daniel crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me. He smelled of cedarwood and safety, and I sank into him, closing my eyes. "We will still get married today," he said firmly. "We will not give them our peace." I wanted to cry, to scream, to crumble under the weight of it, but I had already cried enough in my life. I thought of every bill I had covered for them, every quiet bailout, every deposit I had made into their accounts without a word. 5 years of help. $5 million in total. They lived in their house, drove their cars, and hosted their gatherings because I made sure the money was there. They liked to act as if they were the ones helping me, telling friends and family that I was still finding my way or still needing guidance. But the truth was the opposite. Without me, their world would have cracked years ago. And on the one day that should have belonged to me, they still chose Ava. I walked to my desk in the corner of the room. The old wood creaked as I pulled out my laptop. My attorney in Boston, Ruth Sterling, had set up legal structures for me last year: trusts, accounts, automatic transfers. I opened the files now, my fingers moving with a certainty I didn't feel in my chest. Daniel touched my shoulder. "What are you doing?" "I need 10 minutes, I said quietly. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll wait on the porch." When the door closed behind him, I sat there staring at the message again, letting it burn into me. My parents had forgotten who paid for their lives. They had forgotten who had kept them from drowning in debt. And now they had tried to teach me a lesson by leaving me alone. So, I decided to teach them one instead. I logged into the trust dashboard. One by one, I clicked through the authorizations I held. I froze every card, every line of credit, every automatic transfer that fueled their daily comforts. The mortgage I had been covering, the car payments I had been sending, even the monthly household fund that paid for their groceries, all of it stopped with the press of a button. My heart should have been racing, but it wasn't. I felt calm, not empty.
Calm.
By the time Daniel returned, leaning against the doorframe with quiet patience, I closed the laptop. "It's done," I said simply. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He held out his hand, and I took it. Together, we walked out of the house and down the quiet Charleston street to his car. The sky overhead was gray, the kind that promised rain but held it back, like the world itself was waiting. At the courthouse, we signed the papers. Maya stood beside me, her hand gripping mine, her eyes shining with pride. There was no music, no family, no grand celebration. But when I spoke my vows to Daniel, the words felt stronger than anything I had ever said. They were words built not on show, but on truth. By the time we drove back to my house, the porch light had flicked on automatically, spilling gold across the steps. I stood there for a moment, staring at the glow against the twilight, and I felt something unexpected. I felt steady. It wasn't the wedding I had imagined, but it was ours. And for the first time in years, I knew the life I was stepping into was one I chose for myself. The morning after my wedding, I woke up to the shrill sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. At first, I thought it was just a single call, maybe from Maya, wanting to check in on how I was feeling. But when I rolled over and saw the screen, I nearly laughed. There were 10 missed calls, all from my parents. By the time I pulled on my robe and padded into the kitchen, the number had climbed to 15. My coffee maker hissed as it came to life, filling the quiet house with its low hum, and still, my phone buzzed relentlessly. My mother, my father, and finally, Ava. I didn't answer a single one. I let the messages pile up until the little icon glowed red, demanding my attention. Only then did I pour a cup of coffee, sit at the counter, and press play. My mother's voice came first, sharp but strained. "Elena, there's a problem with the card. The bank is confused. Call me back as soon as you can." The next message was from my father. "Elena," he snapped, as though I were a child caught misbehaving. "I cannot get gas. This is embarrassing. Fix it." And then, of course, Ava. Her voice was dripping with annoyance, not concern. "Whatever you did, undo it now. I have guests coming for dinner tonight, and I don't have time for your drama. Don't ruin this." I set the phone down and took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the taste of it. My house was silent, peaceful, everything I had wanted it to be. It was the first time in years that I felt like the weight was lifting from my shoulders. Daniel walked in, hair still mussed from sleep, and leaned on the counter. His eyes drifted toward the phone, then back to me. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. "I want to tell the truth," I said, "and I want to keep my peace." For years, I had carried their burdens quietly. I had paid the deposit on Ava's glossy Manhattan apartment, though she told everyone she had saved it herself. I had wired money to cover her first year of rent. Before that, I had bought her a car in Chicago when she insisted it was the only way she could look successful enough for a new job. And all of it, every dollar, had come from me. I used to believe silence was love. That if I gave without asking for thanks, maybe one day they would see me for who I was and not the shadow behind Ava. But silence had only made me invisible. I called my attorney, Ruth Sterling, the woman who had helped me set up my accounts, trusts, and investments. She congratulated me on my marriage before I even explained why I was calling. Then she said, with her usual calm tone, "Everything is secure, Elena. You did nothing illegal. You simply stopped giving." Stopped giving. The phrase echoed in my head. At noon, I decided to call my parents. My phone had nearly overheated with the constant buzzing, and I wanted the conversation to be final. I set the phone on speaker on the kitchen table, and Daniel sat beside me, his hand closing around mine. My mother answered on the first ring. Her voice was high, almost shrill, like a kettle whistling. "Sweetheart, there was a little confusion in New York last night. The dinner ran late. We planned to drive down to Charleston after brunch." I felt my jaw tighten. "After brunch," I repeated. "On my wedding day." My father's voice broke in, deep and firm. "Elena, we raised you. We deserve respect." I laughed, a sharp sound that surprised even me. "You raised me on my money. Do you remember what you said? That I should stay alone on my marriage day to learn a lesson? Well, now you can stay alone with your bills. There was silence, the kind that stretched until you could almost hear hearts beating on the other end. My mother tried again, softer this time. We are family. We help one another. I helped you, I said, my voice steady, for 5 years. I paid a total of $5 million. And you couldn't even show up for me. My father cleared his throat, trying to sound composed. Your sister needed us. I closed my eyes and shook my head. Ava always needs you, and you always choose her. I thought back to a trip I had taken to London for work. I had walked through a quiet street lined with stone houses, each with iron gates and flower boxes overflowing with color. I had told myself that one day I would buy a place like that for holidays. Back then, I had even considered sending Ava money to plan her own London vacation, but of course, she had needed something else before that. I was always ready to give. Always. But I was done. I froze the accounts I control. I told them, call the bank if you want. They'll confirm it. My mother gasped. Elena, please. We made a mistake. No, I said firmly. You made a choice. So did I. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could almost picture them sitting in their kitchen, my mother wringing her hands, my father fuming but unable to argue, and Ava pacing the floor in her fancy Manhattan apartment, her dinner plans unraveling. Daniel squeezed my hand, reminding me I wasn't alone anymore. For years, I had thought my worth was tied to their approval. But in that moment, I realized something far stronger. I didn't need their approval to stand tall. I ended the call without saying goodbye. The house fell back into silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I took another sip of coffee, but this time it tasted different, like freedom. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange calm. I knew the storm was brewing on their end, that their voices would spread to relatives, that rumors would swirl. But for once, I wasn't afraid of it. I sat on the porch swing with Daniel, feeling the Charleston breeze on my face, and I let myself smile. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't their provider. I wasn't their silent bank. I was myself. And they were finally going to learn what life looked like without me holding them up. By the end of that week, the news had spread far beyond my parents' kitchen table. I didn't need to check. The calls and texts pouring into my phone told me everything. An uncle in Chicago sent a message claiming he had heard my parents' bank was under attack and asking if I needed help. A cousin in Seattle texted me screenshots of Ava's social media posts, where she ranted in thinly veiled words about selfish people who sabotage their own family out of spite. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she meant. The old me would have felt a rush of shame, scrambling to explain myself, desperate to win back their good opinion. But not this time. This time, I felt strangely steady, as though I had been preparing for this moment without realizing it. The truth was finally out there, and I wasn't going to hide from it. Daniel and I decided to host a dinner that Friday, a small gathering for the people who had truly stood by me. Maya arrived first, carrying a bottle of champagne and a grin that could light up any room. Tonight, she declared, we celebrate you, not them. Mrs. Green, our elderly neighbor, brought a lemon cake dusted with powdered sugar. Every bride deserves sweetness, she told me as she set it on the counter. 2 of my colleagues from Charleston joined us as well, bringing laughter, wine, and the kind of energy that fills a home with warmth. We sat around my oak table, the one I had bought secondhand and refinished myself, and for hours we ate, laughed, and told stories. The walls of my house, paid for by my own hands, echoed with joy, not obligation. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so light. It was in the middle of the desert that the sound of tires crunching over gravel cut through the laughter. Daniel, seated beside me, set down his fork and looked out the window. Headlights glowed in the dark, pulling into the driveway. My chest tightened, though not with fear, more with a grim anticipation. I already knew who it was. Do you want me to send them away? Daniel asked softly. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the choice in my chest. For a moment, The girl I used to be whispered inside me, the one who had always tried to smooth things over, who had always carried the blame. But that girl was gone now. No, I said at last. Let them come. The laughter in the dining room faded as everyone realized what was happening. Maya touched my hand, her eyes asking the question she didn't say aloud. I gave her a small nod before I rose from the table. I stepped onto the porch just as the car doors opened. My parents climbed out slowly, both looking more tired than I had ever seen them. My father, usually proud and polished, held a wilted bunch of grocery store roses in one hand. My mother wore the beige coat I had bought her the Christmas before, its hem now frayed. For a flicker of a second, I saw not the people who had abandoned me, but two aging parents who had leaned on me so long they had forgotten how to stand on their own. My mother was the first to speak. "We came to apologize," she said quietly at the doorway. I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, shutting off the view of my friends, the warmth, the life they had excluded themselves from. The porch light flickered against my parents' faces. "Say it," I told them. "Say the words." My father shifted, his gaze dropping to the wooden boards beneath our feet. "We were wrong," he muttered. "We should have been there." My mother nodded quickly, wringing her hands. "We took you for granted." The words hit me, but not in the way I expected. I had imagined for years what it would sound like to hear them admit fault. But instead of soothing me, the words only reminded me of the years of silence, the years of sacrifices that had gone unnoticed. "You ate from my plate," I said, my voice firm. "From my work, from my sleep, from my kindness. And then you told me I should stay alone on the most important day of my life." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her lip trembling. She reached out a hand as if to close the distance, but I stepped back. "I am not here to comfort you," I told her. "I am here to make things clear." My father straightened slightly, a flash of the old pride returning. "Elena, we are your parents. And I am your daughter," I said, meeting his eyes. "Not your bank." I held out the roses, the wilted symbol of an apology that had come far too late. "I wish you well," I said softly, "but my life has new rules now." They stood frozen, as though the earth itself had shifted beneath them. My mother tried again, but the words caught in her throat. My father finally took the flowers back, his jaw tight. Without another word, I turned and stepped inside. I locked the door behind me. The moment the latch clicked, the weight in my chest lifted. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes, and felt Daniel's arms encircle me. He kissed my forehead, grounding me back into the warmth of the life I had chosen. Maya pressed a slice of lemon cake in my hand. "Here," she said gently. "You've earned it." I laughed through the lump in my throat and took a bite. The sweet tang of the lemon filled my mouth, and suddenly, everything felt lighter. Behind me, through the walls, I could hear my parents' car engine starting again, the sound of it fading into the night. But inside my house, laughter rose once more. My home was mine again, my life filled not with demands but with choice. That evening, as I sat back down at the oak table, surrounded by the people who truly cared for me, I realized something profound. Forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. They might one day earn a place in my life again, but it would not be through guilt or manipulation. It would be through action. For now, I was free. And freedom tasted a lot like lemon cake. A month after our wedding, a simple white envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was our marriage license, the official proof of what I already knew deep in my heart, that Daniel and I had chosen one another, not in the shadow of my parents' neglect, but in the light of our own truth. I held the paper in my hands for a long time, letting its weight settle into me. It was not just a document, it was a new beginning. We celebrated by taking a weekend trip to Savannah. The cobblestone streets and moss-draped oaks reminded me of how beauty often grows out of age, not despite it. We walked by the river, hand in hand, and let ourselves dream aloud. Daniel wanted a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a quiet retreat where we could disappear for long weekends. I wanted a holiday in London, to finally see those stone houses I had admired, and to sit in a little cafe, without guilt tugging at me. We decided then and there to set aside £50,000. Yes, in pounds for that trip because planning joy was just as important as planning bills. Back home in Charleston, I made an appointment with Ruth Sterling, my attorney. Sitting across from her polished desk, I handed her the updated documents for my accounts and trusts. She skimmed through them with sharp eyes before looking up at me. "Your boundaries are strong," she said. "Keep them." "I will," I replied, surprising myself with how certain I felt. The calls from my parents had slowed, but they hadn't stopped. One afternoon, my mother left a voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, softer, like someone learning how to walk again. She said she had started a job at a local shop. There was pride in her words, but also hesitation. She wanted me to call her back. I listened to the message twice before deleting it. I wished her growth, truly, but I was not ready to step back into the cycle. A few days later, my father sent me a long text. He said he was proud of me, proud of my house, proud of my work. He asked if we could meet for coffee in Charleston. For a moment, the old reflex tugged at me, the girl who would have rushed to meet him, wallet in hand, desperate for his approval. But I was not that girl anymore. I typed one line in response. "I hope you are well." Nothing more. Daniel noticed the quiet after that. "How do you feel?" he asked one evening as we sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip behind the trees. "Lighter," I said honestly. Like I finally set down a suitcase I didn't realize I'd been carrying all these years. That Sunday, we invited our friends again. The yard smelled of grilled vegetables and charcoal, and laughter rose into the warm Charleston air. Maya brought over her homemade sangria, and Mrs. Green wandered over with her tiny dog in tow. We talked about everything: work, dreams, the silly things that had made us laugh that week. During the evening, Daniel and I shared our new idea, a small fund to help girls in Charleston learn to code. "We'll start with $120,000, I told them, "and build it every year." The table erupted in applause, and for the first time, giving didn't feel like losing. It felt clean. It felt right. As the stars appeared overhead, I slipped away for a moment and stood alone on the porch. The wooden boards were warm beneath my feet, and the soft rustle of the oak leaves filled the night like a song only I could hear. I looked at my house in America, my name on the deed, and I felt grounded in a way I never had before. I thought about that cruel message on my wedding day. "Stay alone so you can learn a lesson." They had been right in a way. I had learned a lesson, but not the one they intended. I had learned that my love was not for sale. I had learned that a boundary could be both a door I closed and a window I opened. To joy, to peace, to something better. Inside, laughter rang out again, Daniel's voice blending with Maya's, the sound of glasses clinking, the warmth of chosen family. That was what I wanted to hold on to. Not guilt. Not shame. Not endless sacrifice. My parents had tried to come back into my life with words and with tears, but they would need more than that. They would need action. They would need to show me, not tell me, that things had changed. Maybe one day, if time proved their growth, I would let them in for tea. But not today. That night, after the guests had gone and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I sat at my kitchen table with a plain notebook. I opened to a fresh page and began to write. Not just the story of what had happened, but the numbers too, because numbers do not lie. $5 million given. 0 thanks on the day that mattered most. 1 house that I love. 1 marriage that began with truth. I paused, looking at the words on the page. Then I signed the bottom, like it was a contract with myself. I am Elena Carter of Charleston, South Carolina. I was at the bank. I am not the bank anymore. And for the first time, I felt free enough to believe it.